Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler here, your host on Inspire Nation. If you ever wanted to achieve your dreams and find a way to finally succeed, no matter the busyness, then do we have the One Thing Show for you. Today we'll be talking with Jay Papasan, Vice President and Executive Editor at Keller Realty, co-owner Papasan Properties Group, along with his wife, and co-author of the bestseller, The One Thing. To me, after reading nearly 500 books on the show, still one of the greatest business books of all time, right up there alongside Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, if not higher. And so today I want to speak with him about the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. That plus we'll talk about the trouble with truthiness, fear of chaos, city slickers and curly, learning on manual typewriters, frogs in boiling water, living like Ebenezer Scrooge, do fish really smell from the neck down, and what in the world does Mia Hamm have to do with anything? So, gotcha. So welcome to the show, Jay. Are you ready to shine?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Before we dive right into things, I've got to ask, how was your typing at age 12?
Two fingers probably. I can remember the fascination because I had one of those keyboards, it was an actual typewriter that if you did them at the same time, they would lock.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. So
Mom used electrical tape on mine, so I couldn't cheat and look at the keys.
Oh, wow. I never took a typing class. It's one of my challenges today. I can touch type, but not as fast as a lot of my friends can. So last year I did a challenge, and I have it on my goals to do a challenge this year where I do 66 straight days of typing training just so I can improve a really basic part of my profession.
One of my long-term goals, I don't know if I'll get to it this year, but one of my long-term goals is to throw out the QWERTY keyboard, which was actually, I looked into this, it was designed for manual typewriters to keep you from jamming keys. It's designed to make you slower. And so there are a lot of keyboard methods that are significantly faster, take you from 100 to 400 words a minute.
I need to get from about 50 to 100. That's my goal right now.
As an amazing writer, it's an awesome goal. I see you getting there.
I know I will. I'm just going to chip away at it one day at a time.
I like that. So let's jump ahead. How did you end up wanting to getting into the book writing business?
Well, I think like a lot of kids, I had my nose in a book, from day one. I can remember maybe fourth grade. I think her name was Miss Bodiford. She read The Hobbit aloud to our class, like during that calm down time in the afternoon. And I'd never read a fantasy novel before. And I remember going to the little one-room library, and I pretty much read that entire library over the course of the next year and a half. So I think I had a passion for books. And, as you alluded to from our earlier, conversation, like around 12, I just decided I was going to write a knockoff of The Hobbit. And, at that time, I was also reading a lot of Conan the Barbarian, believe it or not. Like that was just like you get into these little grooves, and that was what was interesting for my 12-year-old brain. And I got a card table, borrowed my mom's typewriter and, a bunch of paper and, set about being a writer for a little while. I wish I still had that writing. My mom remembers me doing this, but nobody knows where the writing is.
I still remember from about that age writing about Planet X Blixum. I read lots of Isaac Asimov, and so I was writing about different planets and peoples and stuff. So
sci-fi came later for me. I actually shelved in college. One of my part-time jobs was working in a bookstore, and I shelved the sci-fi section. And so I read extensively there for many years. There's some great stuff there.
There is. I also got into Hardy Boys, and around me became a TV show. Mike Hammer was written about my neck of the woods in near Salem or Danvers, Massachusetts. Okay. And so I got into these seedy detective novels.
Oh, well, that's great. All right. I love a good hard-boiled, mystery. Those are fun.
So let's go from there. I'm really big into synchronicities. And so you went from working in New York City, if I understand, working in the book industry, to working with Gary Keller's team. But then there was a synchronicity that took place when you told him that you were an author and you might be able to help him write some books.
Okay, so the storyline goes, I went abroad for a little while. That's a longer side story. I actually ended up in New York because I got my master's at NYU. So I got a master's with a creative dissertation at NYU, leaped from there into publishing, where I worked for about 6 years and got to work on, you alluded to Mia Hamm, I got to work on some best-selling books, and a lot of them were in sports and how-to, and met my wife, and then we relocated to Austin. We both
pause. How'd you meet her?
We met her at a friend's birthday party. So 2 years in a row. The first year, I just broken up with a really fabulous lady that I actually thought I was going to marry. But on the eve of her moving to New York to join me, I had to really get serious about it. I remember she called. She was going to sell her car. And I was like, okay, that's real. And I really just kind of examined my heart, and I wasn't ready for it. And not fun. But a week later, I met Wendy. And nothing happened because I was in that state of mind. And then exactly 1 year later, on our mutual friend Amy Lambeau's birthday, we met again, and it was immediate. Like before the night was over, I asked for her phone number. We were going out, and by the third date, we both kind of knew that was it. So I don't know. It's one of those timing things. We met each other at the right time in our lives. So we actually quit our jobs in New York. Backpacked for about 5 months while we were figuring out where to go. And we actually moved very randomly to Austin. We came here for a weekend because she'd been here. It was like leaving New York City in February. You were up from the Northeast, coming down to Austin. And it was like 80 degrees in February. Like we had no clothes for it. We fell in love with the city and moved here without jobs. And lo and behold, about a year later, I'm working at Keller Williams. And I thought I'd left the book world. I was going to be a tech writer. I thought, okay, I'll transition from books. There's no publishing in Austin. I'll transition into, I like technology. I'll be a tech writer. So I was working in the tech department, this little tiny real estate firm. And I see one of the designers working on a book cover. And I asked him, I said, Brad, what are you working on? And I kind of thought he might be doing freelance work at work. And I was cool with it. I was just interested because I didn't expect to see anybody working on a book. And he goes, oh, don't you know Dave Jinks, who is one of our former co-authors, and Gary Keller are writing a book? And I'm like, no. And that's when I ran into Gary Keller literally in the bathroom. He was in there, long story, he made some wisecrack about, being the chairman of the board and not too, uppity to clean the bathroom because he was literally cleaning up. And I said, I hear you're writing a book. Do you remember I used to be in publishing? And he had not remembered that when he hired me. Yeah. And he called me into his office, and he laid out a vision for writing 13 books, believe it or not. Like he hadn't written one book, but he already had a vision for a franchise. That's just the way he thinks. He's always expansive, always looking way, way out and say, if I'm going to do something today, what would that be connected to in the future? And he pitched me the first book, which was called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. And I told him it wouldn't sell very well. That book went on to sell 1 million copies, by the way. I was totally wrong. Yeah. I said, that's a niche book. That won't sell very well. If you're lucky, you'll get 50,000 copies. It's always good to remember where you were wrong. And then he laid out 5 books. He had gone to the bookstore with Dave, and they'd picked out their favorite how-to books and business books. And it's just one of those weird stories where things really come together. And of the 5 books, it was like The Millionaire Next Door. If you've never read that, it's fabulous. Good to Great, obviously, which I'm sure almost everybody's at least knows about it. Yeah. And then a book I can never remember, which drives me crazy. And then 2 books I'd edited at HarperCollins. One was Bill Phillips' Body for Life. And the other one was Mia Hamm's Go for the Goal. And he had picked out elements of each of those books he really liked. And it was just one of those moments where I'm like, yeah, well, I know exactly what you're talking about because I did those 2 books. And I showed him my name in the books. And it was pretty much, within an hour, he called my boss and said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And he's like, he was a bad news kind of guy. He's like, what's the bad news? He goes, well, you're losing an employee. The good news is he's going to work for me. And literally the next day I was interviewing for the job of co-author, and we had 30 days to get a business plan to write our first book. And we wrote that book in less, from start to finish, planning and everything, 120 days. It was a little bit more than 90 days of writing. And that's how we launched our partnership. And we've done, either authored or published about 11 books now, most of which have been bestsellers.
And my guess is you're not going to stop at 13.
Oh, no way. No way. We get bogged down every while now and again. The one thing, it took us over 5 years. We stopped in the middle of it to write another book. That's the irony. We're writing a book about focus, and the Great Recession happened, and we wrote a book about surviving recessions because that was our one thing. We actually asked the question. I don't think this book is our one thing right now, given where we work. And we've been working for, 3.5 years now to update the very first book we wrote, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. It's time to give it a refresh. And I can't even tell you, it's really, I've never as an editor or a writer ever had to update a million copy bestseller. There's very few people who've had to do that. And it's a little bit of a tightrope walk. Like, you don't want to change it because it's obviously working, but you can make it better. And so it's been a very good professional challenge for us.
So is that your one thing right now?
It is. My goal is to be out of that manuscript by the middle of the year. The next book we're going to write that will be more in the vein of the one thing is a book called No One Succeeds Alone. And we've done research for years and years on it. And it's really about the power of relationships in work and in life.
Let's dive into the one thing and what that means. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background, see how much we go there today. But I was reading your book, which I keep by my bed often, the one thing, and you have a personal signed copy, and thank you so much. I was reading it again this week, and it was bedoggling me. It was actually, it was ticking me off in a good way, Jay, because we are now, as I was telling you, this is like episode 555, all daily show, one after the next, after the next, after the next. Our one thing is to help people, is to what we call help them to shine bright, whether that's teaching, coaching, the show, or writing or speaking, all of these things. But the next step for us is to step back and get back into book writing, which is what I love the most. And what's driving me insane is my one thing the helping people? Is my one thing the show? What is my one thing? So maybe we need to define it first and then start to understand this.
Sure. So define the one thing in general as in terms of the book, right? So at the heart of the book is a question we call the focusing question. And it's, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And when you ask that question, in our experience, most people have a pretty good sense. They can narrow it down, right? Mm-hmm. You've narrowed it down to just a handful of things. They can narrow it down, and they usually pick, in my experience, the right thing. But there are times in our lives in certain professions where it is, did you say bedoggling? I mean, that was a great word.
Yes, I did.
Excellent. It can be very bedoggling to really work it out, especially in business. So I'll just say this at a high level. Every business, no matter what you're in, you kind of have two jobs. We wrote about that in that first book that we mentioned. You have the job of delivering whatever service it is, and you want to be the best you can in the world at making people shine. And the other one is you have to lead generate for that business. Because a business without customers, it doesn't matter how good you are, right? And some people make the service their lead generation. It's so good that people just tell each other about it. But I think about what you do. If you're writing books, the podcast is how you reach the broadest possible audience so that the work you put in the books has the biggest possible impact. And I find myself in that mode too. So I'll tell you what bedoggles me. I'm just going to love this word all day because as an English major, word nerd, Scrabble player, that just doesn't come up that often. All right. So as an author, I kind of have three hats that I have to wear. Mm-hmm. And you'll be familiar with this. I'm doing part of it right now. We have to research a book.
Yep.
And that's the mad scientist phase. And I love that, right? I'm reading. If you pan around my office, it's just covered in books, right? I'm in my happy place. So I'm reading, I'm interviewing people. We call it modeling in the sense, not like fashion modeling, but we're benchmarking. Mm-hmm. What is the actual idea behind this? What does that look like? And we're trying to distill all of these ideas into like the images in this book and the checklist in this book. I love that part. And then you have to transition. Like there's a certain point where you've done enough. It's time to write. And that usually is very intense, very tough. You've really got to have big blocks of time, 3 to 4 hours a day, so that you can really make progress. And usually days strung together, like 4 or 5 days in a row, if not every day. And that's very demanding. And then when you finish a book, guess what? If you want to reach the biggest possible audience, you have to do things like we're doing right now. You have to go out and talk about it. You have to time block, dedicate time to promoting it. And it's just kind of like it's 3 steps, right? And you're just constantly rotating through that. And it can be a challenge to be between two. There are periods of my life where I feel like I have 2 one things. And right now, I've definitely, at the beginning of this year, I transitioned and I'm trying to dedicate and prioritize the writing time because it's now the writing part for our first book, updating it, over the promotion time for the one thing. And the one thing, who I never would have guessed, I had hoped, I would have never guessed that in its fourth year of publication, it would sell more books than the third or the second or the first book. It's one of those rare books that has continued to grow. And, it's a baby. You've got to keep nurturing it, right? So it's put us at a little bit of a bedoggling bind where those two things can feel oppositional at times. So I feel your pain, but usually it's a transition. Like you're in a transition from one mode to the other. So now let's go back to yours. What can we do to help you solve this problem?
Well, we've just started surveying our audience, trying to say, okay, do we need to be 7 days a week? Can we be 5 days a week? For a creative period, even over the summertime, could I even transition down to sacrilege, but maybe a couple days a week so I can get that block of time? Because I've dove into our next book, and I use my early morning writing. Bless you. I use that early morning writing, and what I'm finding is, like you, I'm needing more of a 3 or 4 hour block rather than just a touch or go, because I get into the rhythm, or not, maybe even I get into the rhythm, I get something down, I step away, then I want to come back and really dive even deeper. But I'm sorry, it's time to dive into other people's books, which is great, to get ready for your show for the day.
Yeah.
It's bedoggling.
Have you talked to anyone else who's faced that same problem?
That's an excellent question. No, I have not.
I can think of, I know John Lee Dumas has a daily show.
Yeah.
He also produces works. Go out and survey some of the folks that are doing what you're doing. They have a daily practice, whatever that is. And in this case, the podcasting, you know exactly how much work that takes. And then they also are producing something that takes longer blocks of time. So if you don't know, like, your answer, your number one job is to go find it. So what you have wonderfully is right now, this perch, you have a platform that allows you to interview people at length.
Absolutely.
So, and people, because it allows them to also shine a spotlight on their causes and what's important to them. In this case, for me, a book that I've spent now 8 years of my life plus on. I definitely, that's great value to me. So I think that I might start there. Has someone else found a solution? I know I've seen people have guest hosts for periods of time. Mm-hmm. I know I've seen people double down for periods of time so that they can have, I know Tim Ferriss has talked about that, going into mad production mode on his podcast so he can take 4 and 5 months off to finish his books. I would go out, Google, and start interviewing people. Who do you know that's faced a similar problem that's really come out ahead? Because there's a great book, I'm trying to think, Stumbling on Happiness. Have you ever read that in your 500 books?
No, I haven't.
Okay, fabulous book on psychology. Very influential for me. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of the author's name, but I could leave camera and tell you. But I'll tell you afterwards if you want. It was very influential. Talked about like everything from why we always think we pick the wrong line at the supermarket, right? All the little tricks we play. But one of the things I took away is we all want to believe we're unique snowflakes, that our problems are so unique to us. But if you really want to know what it's like to live in Pittsburgh, just ask 9 or 10 people. And chances are their answers will be highly likely to match your own. And it's that psychological thing that we're so keyed in to our personal experience, we forget how much overlay there is. So we can learn a lot. Don't repeat the mistakes of others, learn from them.
I'm so happy you said this, and it's something I do a lot of coaching. And we were talking earlier and saying that you can't coach yourself and you can't coach your wife.
Yeah. I can coach my wife only by permission. That's the nature of our relationship. She's the boss of our real estate business. And when she wants to talk about it, I'm all ears. And I try to do what I did with you. Like I want to come in riding on my white horse and just say the answer. Because I'm opinionated. I bet you are too. But it's better, much more powerful. We wrote a book about it, to ask questions. Mm-hmm. Have you considered? Have you talked to anybody else? And it gets people to discover their own answers. And as a coach, when people come up with their own answers, there's no friction, right? And they're much more likely to actually take action on it. And sometimes we can lead our children, our spouses, and ourselves to the answer to self-discover, so they'll actually take action through great questions.
I like that. And for Jessica, I know she mentioned last night, she goes, when's the next time you are actually going to coach me? And I said, just put it in the calendar. We'll get it done, because that gives a clean demarcation. So this is coach hat time, not spouse time. And it becomes a lot cleaner that way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I'm with you on that.
On that note, and I want to dive into the book, and we're going to start with multitasking here in a second. But before I do that, if we really look at your one thing, and you mentioned it before your show, you mentioned 3 one things. Your first one thing is your marriage, I believe.
Yes. On my goal sheet, it's right here in front of me. I keep it in my journal with me all the time. It says, be the best husband and father I can be. That's what it says right across the top. And then there's 3 words: family, impact, and profit. And the best husband and father is, I've discovered, it's kind of cheesy, but my purpose, as we talked about in the book, that's the thing that tends to motivate me more than anything else. I've shared this story before. Hopefully I didn't share it with you, so it's new. But I was working on a book on commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. I did not want to be working on that book. It was something that the business needed, and it was just, some work is, you just got to do it. And my head wasn't in the game. And I remember telling my wife that I was going to interview the co-author, who was a very fabulous commercial agent, and I was going to let it be his book. I was just going to relate his stories and not do the usual rigmarole of the, hundreds of interviews and all the background reading. Just do the short, simple book. And she, being a good coach when called upon, she said, you tell your family that you're an author, and it sounds a lot like you're mailing it in. And I was just like, okay, that's just not fair. Because what I realized is the thing that motivates me a lot more than selling books or getting awards is the respect of my wife and kids. I can't tell my kids to give their best every day if I'm not. And living in integrity, right, on those messaging, that now I can look at my work and see it as part of those 2 jobs. I've aligned those dominoes. If I'm doing my best here, I'm aligning with the messages I want my children to receive and being a role model for them. And I'm continually asking for and earning my wife's respect. And respect, in all the research I've read, is a very, very big measure of what we call love. And when people lose respect for one another is when they separate. And so it feels like something that I should continually earn rather than take for granted. And so that's why my purpose statement is that. And then 3 words remind me of my priorities. It is family first. Mm-hmm. I want to have an impact second. And then profit comes last. But now I judge what I'm going to do by those 3 things. Will it impact my family positively? Can I have a positive impact on the world? And in terms of dollars per hour, like is it a high use of our time in terms of, the best use of building our wealth so that we can give more?
I love it.
That's a long answer. Sorry about that.
It works great, and I love it. I hate it. I hope it's meant with the utmost respect. I love dogs, even though we don't have one right now. We're moving soon, and I have visions of dog. Your bones.
What's that?
Your bones, the bones yes. that what you're going to earn, what the reward is. The respect is the biggest bone that comes first, and then the other bones right behind it. Right.
And I think the answer is different for everyone. That's just the way I've found my answer. I mean, some people are very motivated straight by money. Mm-hmm. And that is it. They want things. They want relationships. They want influence. And I think people have to ask the question and not judge the answer. What motivates you to be your best person? Use it and leverage that so that you're willing to put in the hours when other people are not.
Thank you. So let's dive into some nitty-gritty in your book, and it's a brilliant book. Everybody's going to want to go out and get it. I'm not just saying that. This book changes how you do everything. First off, why does multitasking cost time rather than paying it?
Multitasking, we call it a lie in the book, and we came up with about 7 different researched answers, but I'll give you the short 3. One, when we call it multitasking, we're actually switch tasking. Mm-hmm. And so you're actually bouncing back and forth so rapidly you're not aware of it. And it costs you time. And so there was one researcher that estimated that people working at a desk job, where they had access to phones and emails, about 28% of their day was lost to multitasking inefficiency. And let me explain that. So you're multitasking. I'm just going to use the example I like is you're writing an email, right? You're an important email to a client, a host, whatever, and you're on the third paragraph and you're very intent, that kind of focus where it takes like someone snapping their fingers to get your attention. And then a distraction arrives. Maybe it's your wife, it's time for dinner, whatever that is. You decide to switch, and that is instantaneous. Squirrel. I mean, you're trained, programmed to go there very quickly. That's how we survived when tigers were stalking us through the tall grass. We're trained and programmed to see distractions. The thing that happens that we're not aware of is reorientation. Your brain has to change from the rules of what you were doing to the rules of where you're going. And if you've ever had that moment of deep focus where someone's talking to you and you kind of have to shake your head and say, I'm sorry, what were you saying? That's the reorientation time. And that's that 28% when we're bouncing between Twitter and Facebook and our work. We're not even accounting for it. It's just lost time. And then if you add in the fact, like when I come back from dinner with the wife, right? That was great. Awesome. Now I switch instantaneous. I have to reorient to the rules of what I was doing. So you're like, what was I doing? Where was I? If you're on the third paragraph, what do you automatically have to do?
Reread.
Yeah, you have to start from the very beginning. And we don't even think of that lost time. Every time we stop, there you have to restart the whole process. So time, which I would argue is our most valuable asset, right? We all get the same amount. It's non-renewable. What you do with it defines your life. So that to me is why that's number one. It also makes you highly ineffective. There's a guy named Clifford Nass that we quote extensively in the research, and he did extensive testing with a bias towards multitasking. He thought they were marvelous creatures, like magical creatures. And he got a whole bunch of them in a room with people who said they couldn't do it, gave them a battery of tests, and at the end of it, he said, quote, high multitaskers are suckers for irrelevancy. They were lousy at everything. Every single test, including multitasking, they were outperformed by the people who said they couldn't do it. So time, efficiency, I could go into IQ. It'll knock about at least six IQ points off of you when you're multitasking.
And I've heard recently even that people that say that it's safe to drive a car if you're using a hands-free system, that's a multitasking that doesn't work as well.
It's kind of, they call it background. If we want to get really nerdy, right? You think about it, you're not occupying your visual channel. Like you have different channels. You can listen to things while you're walking. You can talk while you're walking. You tend to, in an emergency, right? Let's just say I'm talking to my mom and I'm walking. No problem at all. I can carry a conversation and walk. If I'm going to cross a rope bridge over a canyon, I'm going to be like, Mom, I'm going to call you back, right? And I'm not going to be distracted while I know I need 100% of my focus. So we're aware that there's a drain. It's just not as dramatic. At the same time, if I had to talk someone into landing an airplane, right? I probably would stop walking. If you've ever been to a conference where someone's trying to take an important call and there's all that noise, they will literally face a wall, put a finger in their ear, they'll close their eyes, they shut down every channel so they can focus on that one. So there is a cost, it's just not as pronounced. So the reason people are so aggressive against texting while driving, because the visual channel is what I need for driving more than anything else. And if I distract that, I can miss the kid running across the road. So auditory is less. It's still a distraction, but they don't outlaw that for a reason.
Thank you. Let's go from time.
Very nerdy.
And I like it. So let's keep on that track. Let's keep on the time track, actually, and let's go from multitasking to what we were talking about earlier with writing a book, maybe even what we can learn from Stephen King. What is time blocking?
Okay, so in a simple sense, time blocking is making an appointment with yourself to do your most important work. And most people, if you look at their calendars, it's filled with appointments to meet other people, right? Mm-hmm. Meetings at work, lunches with different people. If you look at the way really successful people, right? I don't want to make it just about money, but in Gary's initial research, he was studying millionaires. If you look at their calendars, they don't just have appointments with other people. Their first appointments are with themselves, and it's to do whatever they deem to be most important. And we did find some research in the British Journal of Health Psychology that really backs this up. I mean, we know anecdotally and from multiple interviews that this seems to work. But this group was asking people to exercise for 20 minutes a day. And they had 3 groups, a control group, a motivation group, and an intention group. And the control group was asked, go exercise for 20 minutes a day, and they were roughly 34% likely to do it. The motivation group was given information that said, if you exercise every day, you'll have lower rates of heart disease, that sort of thing, to tell them, like, this is really good for you. And they were roughly the same amount, 31% likely to go do it. The third group, they called the intention group, was given the same motivation information, but they had to do one additional step. They had to write what they called an intention statement. They had to look at their calendars and say, on this day, at this time, at this place, I'm going to exercise for 20 minutes. And that simple act of having to negotiate their time and identify when and where they were going to do it, which to me is making an appointment, whether it's literal or not, made them more than 90% likely to accomplish their goal. So the simple act of putting that block of time out there makes you 3 times more likely to do it. That's what we call time blocking. It's very simple. It's very effective.
It also sounds like an investment, sort of like if you go to a free conference or seminar, what you get is often what you put into it. If you invest ahead of time and have to plunk down that cash, well, by God, I'm going to get something out of it.
Yeah. So my process is I look at my goals. I showed you, my little goal sheet. I mean, I carry this around with me.
So tell us what's on there.
You obviously can't see it, but I have my annual goals at the top.
Yep.
And based on my annual goals, each month I say, what do I have to do this month to meet these goals? And then each week I ask, what do I have to do this week to be on track for my monthly goals, which I've already decided are on track for my annual goals, which in a larger scheme, my wife and I every year update our 5-year goals, which is a whole other document. We're trying to line up those dominoes so that I can focus on this small block, this weekly work, and know that it's in alignment with where we want to go. And I just look at that. What do I have to accomplish this week? And then I open up my calendar, nice and primitive, and I ask the question around my big ideas, time with family, time with writing, that sort of thing. Do I have enough writing days this month to be on track for my goal? Do I have enough writing days this week? And if the answer is no, I start canceling things. That's goal setting, right? And accountability. I'm just constantly looking at those going, am I on track? And if not, I'm going to take time back from something else to get back on track.
Awesome. On that line, something that you address in the book that I absolutely love is chaos. And the idea that the more successful you get doesn't mean that you're going to get less chaos in your life. You actually may have more of it because you're shifting your focus.
Right. It's the section we call the 4 thieves of productivity. And I love that you got to the back of the book. I think there's some rich material back there. I'm going to, with your permission, I want to hit the first 2 because depending on who you are, I suffer from chaos. It might be that you do too.
Absolutely.
But the first 2 are there for a reason. And the first one is the inability to say no. And the other one is fear of chaos. And if you study behavioral instruments, you look at people, they tend to be either people-oriented or task-oriented. And there's very few people who are right in the middle of that. You lean that way or this way. If you're people-oriented, your struggle is going to be saying no. You don't want to disappoint people. You don't want to damage those relationships. And so learning how to say no to distractions that involve other people is one of the biggest, ways that you can superpower what you want to do. People like me, I tend to be task-oriented. And if you're focused on your one thing, right, which for me right now is writing, and then I'm trying to pick up and just kind of do a little bit of the promotion so that doesn't fall apart, that occupies an inordinate amount of my time. Well, guess what? I mean, we have 7 businesses. We have all of these things in our lives. We got 2 kids, 12 and 11, got aging parents, like minding everything else. Now, kids and parents and family aside, those are priorities. There's a lot of messes in my life. This morning I had to take my dog to the vet. I have clothes to pick up at the laundry. Didn't happen, right? It had to be rescheduled because my priorities messed it up. And that creates real anxiety for me. And I have to remind myself, big success is going to be a little messy. And if I'm always operating in my true priorities and I'm not clearing up the chairs on the Titanic and I'm not making my desk. I mean, if you saw my desk, you'd be appalled. I've got stacks, right? That's as close as I can come. I can be very productive. I know where things are. But I'm not going to go and spend a whole day filing, right? That's going to be somebody else's job. That chaos, if you can keep it at bay, you can stay in your operation mode. The only thing I'll give a concession because I'm human. There are days, and I will just even tell Gary, how did you do today? And I said, I was horrible. It was a mental health day, which is code for I was taking care of all those little things that become so niggling in my mind that I just can't focus anymore. Because I'm definitely wired that way where chaos will unwind me over time. I've gotten stronger, but that's my battle. So people tend to have one or the other. They can't say no. I'm pretty good at that. The chaos is my battle, my cross to bear.
And Jay, that's mine as well. I have a clean desk when it comes to interviews, and I try to keep the studio at bay, although we're moving, which means there's boxes literally in the studio, but everything has an energy to it. And so those stacks that I move around build up, and it gets to a certain point at which that energy is just too much, and I have to hit the brakes and do something with it because it's raising my cortisol levels.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's usually my Saturday mornings. I try to, the kids are going to sleep in. I'm not going to miss family time. We'll go walk the dog, and I'll try to do all those errand type work, right? I'll try to knock it all out by noon so I can really, really rest, nap, enjoy, go to movies with my kids, whatever we're going to do. But we just moved over the holidays, so I feel your pain. It's incredibly stressful. They compare it to the death of a close loved one, actually, the stress that you incur in a move. It's very real what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm going, is there any way, do we not have to, and you're negotiating with life and sometimes it just comes up. On those lines where things are coming up and we get to try to juggle these things, we have a lot of single parents who are listening to this show, and particularly single moms. What advice would you give to try to figure out how to juggle all of this?
Okay, well, my wife was really good at this. She wasn't a single wife, obviously, a single mom. But she really managed one of the biggest battles they're going to face. So I'm going to give them two pieces of advice based on lots of talks and chats with women who, obviously I don't get to live in their shoes, but single parents. One is leverage. I remember we have a program called TaskRabbit. Do you have that?
No.
All right. So I remember when we moved and my wife was 8.5 months pregnant, right? We moved once then, right? And I was unable to help because I was putting a book to bed. We got on TaskRabbit, and for $5 an hour, we got a retired person to come by, and my wife just walked around and had them pack the boxes.
Awesome. We'll be on there.
Yes. So there's lots of resources today where you can get very short-term help, very reliable help to go pick up something for you. And those errands, those little things, when you're the only parent and you have to drop off the kids, you have to pick them up, leverage in the form of other moms. Hey, today's my carpool day. Tomorrow's your carpool day. We had it worked out at one point in our lives because we both were running businesses. And so we were stretched where every day of the week, except for 2, were carpool days. So we only had to drive the kids or pick the kids up 2 days a week. One of the days we were driving around to 6 other houses or whatever, to get everybody else. But it took all those hours, 30 minutes out, 30 minutes back. All those hours came back to our lives because we were able to either get someone to partner with us or we could find someone relatively inexpensive to hire. Now, the second half of this is guilt. Moms in particular, and I don't want to go into stereotypes, but it tends to be true, are a lot more hesitant to step out of roles that are considered to be mom roles. And there is this contest out there to be the mom who does the cupcakes, what I'm talking about, right? Cupcakes for school, and their kids are perfectly dressed, and it's really perverse. And it's okay, right? It's okay if your child's hair did not get brushed today, right? You're not going to have to chop it all off. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. That fear of chaos, and this is a social thing that gets pushed on them. It's okay. It's okay if you hire a nanny to go pick up your kids, and you're not there in the afternoon. You can be role modeling to your daughters what it looks like to be committed to your career. You have to put it in a better frame versus you'll hear people say, what? You're delegating the task of being a mom? No, you're getting help. And single moms and single dads need a lot of it. And they don't need to feel guilty for getting it. And that makes me angry a little bit when I hear that sort of, busy talk. Because there's nothing wrong with it. You can have someone vacuum your house. You can have someone mow your yard. You can have someone do those tasks that people think are well, dad's supposed to mow the yard, right? Or dad's supposed to do that, or mom's supposed to do that. Forget that. Get that time back if you can afford it, and invest it in things that are more valuable.
Well, it gets back to the one thing and to the social construct or paradigm which we're living in is we're told, and particularly in the business world, we're told not to focus on your strengths, but to focus on your weakness, which means that everything becomes mediocre and nothing becomes a priority.
No, I love that you just said that. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I want my children to be operating in their strengths. Obviously, you don't want their weaknesses to be handicapping, right? I'd like them to be able to drive safely, but they don't have to be a NASCAR driver, right? So like we can tackle those things, and you can be very, very average at almost everything. You want to be exceptional in the very few areas that really, truly matter. And you just have to identify those.
From there, and I want to do a little identification. We may or may not have time. Before we do that, how are you juggling your energy, and what is the highly productive person's daily energy plan?
Well, it's happened over many years. My children, right now, 12 and 11, Gus and Veronica, They trained me. I used to be a night owl. I like to stay up when everybody else was already asleep. I would watch movies, read my books, and, generally be a little sleep deprived. And I got away with it in my youth. My children taught me to wake up early. Thankfully, Gus was an early riser, and my job was to get up and feed him his bottle in the morning, which I loved and cherished. And I just never gave up that habit. And now, and I think if you listen to interviews with really successful people, that morning time tends to be the time when we have the most willpower. We write about that in the book. We have the most energy in our minds to do what we need to do. And there's also a lot less interference. And the most successful people often are having an amazing day before noon, and it's kind of crazy what they get accomplished before 8 a.m. So however you define your morning, they're moving it up, right? If you drive taxis at night, maybe you get up at noon, but there's a time that happens before you would normally get up where the rest of your world is asleep, and you can do the things like meditate, you can pray, you can eat a healthy breakfast. I work out with my wife. I read in the mornings. I use that for I did 119 days straight of meditation. That was my longest streak ever before it got broke in the move.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm still failing forward with that habit. But of course, it was in the morning, right? Because I could partition time. I own my time. There's no one else competing for that time. Even the kids aren't awake. The dog's still asleep. And so we could get a lot done in the morning. So I would usually tell people, if you launch your days by addressing your biggest priorities, that energy often will propel you through the day. And the times of day when we naturally lack focus, like after lunch, when you're just like really worn out and your focus wanders, all your important stuff's already done. So you can just be in your email inbox then and be doing that chaos management stuff that's a lot less important. And it takes adjustment.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, both on having been the night owl, going to the morning person, and also cortisol levels when I get up early, and I get up obscenely early now, as you may as well. But no matter what happens later in the day, if I got that morning time, that sacred time, whether it's my meditation, my writing, whatever it is, and certainly that gym time, which at 7:30, that car is started no matter what, if we get that in, it doesn't matter the rest of the day, no matter what fires may burn, feels great.
I know. Well, you know that you checked off your most important things, and everything else is bonus after that.
Absolutely.
Now, I know that everybody's going to have bad days. You can't avoid it. But it really lessens that feeling of coming home at the end of the day where you've run continually, you're in a lather, but when you really think about it, you didn't accomplish anything important. And I don't love those days. My wife thinks I'm weird. She'll say, "Did you have a good day?" And my first response, she actually made this comment at date night this week, because, you'll say something like, "Yeah, I had a really productive day." And for me,
oh no,
I know. Well, that's not her. That's not how she defines a great day. And that's okay. I think she naturally goes to her priorities. But I've taught myself, if I'm operating in my priorities, it's a good day. That means I address the stuff that I've already acknowledged is important. And I'm not joking around. I'm supposed to be a professional here. I'm supposed to be getting stuff done if I'm away from my family.
Woohoo! So what, if I threw on your coach's hat right now, what one homework assignment would you give people today other than going out and getting your book? Actually, first off, where can people go to find your book and to find out more?
Anywhere. If they want to find out more about us, they can go to theonething.com. That's with the number one.
Mm-hmm.
We have all kinds of free resources there. I would tell people to take a moment and ask the question, what's the one thing I can do in whatever it is they deem most important for my health, for my family, for my job, right? What's the one thing I can do for that thing such that by doing it, everything else is easier and necessary? And then go to their calendar and make a real commitment to getting that thing done. And hopefully it's something that's a daily activity or at least a 5-day-a-week activity, if it's a professional one. And you can say, you know what, first thing I come to the office, for the first 30 minutes before I open my email, whatever, I'm going to call my most important client or whatever that thing is. Tackle it as early in the day as you can feel comfortable and don't bite off a mountain, right? Go for the molehill in this case. We talk about the smallest domino first. Go ahead and experience success daily and build on it instead of jumping straight to the finish line with impatience. So it's a very complex one thing. Figure out something that's really, really a priority. Make a commitment on your calendar to start doing it and just kind of start small because I promise the momentum will build faster than you think.
Thank you. And if you want to find out more about dominoes and how one can push a bigger one and push a bigger one, get his book and you'll understand why starting off small is great. What words of wisdom would you give to parents to help their kids today?
Gosh, well, it all depends on the age, right? But, it's time. It's time listening to them. It's time not being distracted, listening and interacting with them. And when we give our kids time and we ask questions and are patient enough to wait for the answers, which is tough, we can really enrich their lives. And I think it's really easy to be blowing and going and call, an hour sitting in front of the TV together quality time. We made a commitment a long time ago to have dinner together as a family.
Awesome.
So that's a ritual, right? Where we sit at the table, the TV's off, except for Friday night. That's movie night, where we get to eat in front of the TV. And that feels special to them. But the rest of the week, we sit down, we say what we're most thankful for that day. We just go around the table and we have a chance to talk. And, I've got tweens. They're going to be teenagers. They may not talk to me at dinner time then. I don't know. But so far, so good. And it's just 30 minutes. It's not 2 hours. It's not like a formal meal, but it allows us to be engaged in their lives and a little bit closer to what's going on. And that allows us to be better prepared to help.
Awesome. And you brought a very important word there, presence. So
Yes.
You are there with them. 2 quick wrap-up questions. First off, what personally brings you the greatest happiness or what I call the woohoo factor?
Oh, gosh. Right now, it is time with my kids. I know that it's precious. And, I'll be in the room. Sometimes my kids are in the other room. And I'm just like, this last Saturday, my son was playing video games. And he was talking to one of his best friends. And he was laughing so hard. And it was so contagious that we were, 2 rooms away. And we both started giggling and just couldn't stop. And that to me is, for me, my children's laughter is like the essence of joy for me right now, especially when I'm enjoying it with my wife. So that's about as good as it gets for me.
Woohoo! Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today, Jay?
Can I give you a challenge?
Certainly.
I would challenge you, if you don't, find the answer, why don't you start really small? What would happen if you just dedicated 30 minutes every morning to writing 1 page? You'd have a 365-page draft by end of 1 year. It's okay to go slow. Great things take time. But, as I was giving that journal advice, I know people that's it. That's all they do. And Pulitzer Prize winning authors, that's their whole ritual, is to sit down and just make progress. And a little bit can go a long way.
I will take that challenge. I'm up at, I don't even want to say when I'm up, but I'm getting in a good hour each morning. There's that flow of getting that large block. And I'm challenging myself to step back from my calendar and really try to figure out a different way. We're very strong in challenge our beliefs, challenge them more. What's a limiting belief? And trying to step outside of this to understand what's the fishbowl I've created.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're asking those questions. Those are the right questions to ask, and that's the path. It doesn't always happen as fast as we want it, but you'll find your answers.
Well, thank you so much, Jay. This has been awesome having you on the show. Everyone, you're going to go out and get the one thing. I can't speak highly enough about it. This has been fantastic, and I love particularly, I was just had on the show Pat Flynn yesterday. He's in this camp as well, and you guys are big fans of each other. He has his priority in order, family first, as do you. I think that is so important today.
It's not an impediment. For me, it's something that pushes me forward. And if someone's telling you different, they're the wrong role model. I really believe that firmly. I try to follow. I don't know if you know who Sarah Blakely is.
Name's familiar.
She started Spanx.
Oh, yeah, yes. We had her husband on the show.
Yeah, Jesse. And I look for examples of people, because if you follow her on Instagram, she's always with her kids. Mm-hmm. She's a billionaire. She's built this huge thing, and they have a rich life. They both have their own businesses. We should all be looking for better role models. I mean, for all I know, there's nastiness there. I hope not. Please, no, because we never know. But you need to look for role models for these things. And I just think that they're not featured enough, but you can find them if you look for them. Because I do believe that you can have as much success as you want in business and with family. They're not mutually exclusive. I firmly believe that. And I'll go to my grave probably believing that.
Thank you, and a mighty woohoo!
Thank you.
So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, focus on the one thing, and see your own extraordinary results, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Jay.
Awesome. That was fun. I love the positive energy. It just comes all the way through this technology.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!